My name is Daniel Caldwell. I'm 45 years old, and until 9:16 a.m. last Tuesday, I was the Chief Operating Officer of Redwood Systems, a Tech4 healthcare logistics firm based in Seattle, Washington. The words were simple, just 7 of them, but they cracked something open inside me. Your services are no longer required. The polished oak conference table I was seated at, I picked it out myself 3 years ago, part of a top-to-bottom redesign I led when our company closed Series C funding. I remembered how proud I felt signing that deal. Now, I sat frozen in the chair, the world tilting sideways, the air sucked out of the room. 15 years. 15 damn years of sweat equity, crisis management, and building Redwood from a 3-room startup into an industry player. And this was how it ended? The faces around me belonged to men I'd once trusted. We'd built this place together, or so I'd thought. I'd pulled late-night strategy sessions with them, showed up to their kids' birthdays, answered panic calls when servers went down or contracts unraveled. But now, they wouldn't even meet my eyes. Except one, Carl Whitaker, CEO, former mentor, supposed friend. He looked straight at me, his face a cold slab of executive neutrality. But I caught the twitch at the corner of his mouth. Smug satisfaction. He spoke next, his voice full of that polished gravitas he loved to use when delivering bad news with a smile. We've decided to take Redwood in a new direction. Next to him stood Logan, his 33-year-old son-in-law. The same Logan who once asked me how to set up a client onboarding portal. The same guy who got promoted to vice president the week after he married Carl's daughter, Amanda. Carl's voice droned on. Effective immediately. Logan will assume your responsibilities. I didn't speak right away. Couldn't. My tongue felt like stone. When I finally did, my voice sounded far away. And when exactly did the board vote on this? I looked at Steven, our CFO, who'd texted me the night before to confirm lunch. He kept his eyes glued to a spreadsheet on his tablet. It was decided late last night. Emergency session. Right. An emergency session I wasn't told about. And what was the emergency? That I stood in the way of Carl handing his legacy to a man who hadn't earned it? Carl slid a thick manila envelope across the table toward me. Your separation package. I believe you'll find it generous. I didn't touch it. 15 years, I said quietly. I know this is difficult, Carl replied, doing a bad job of sounding sincere. But Redwood needs fresh ideas. We have to adapt to a changing landscape. Fresh ideas. No, what he meant was, I become a threat. I knew the systems too well. The clients trusted me too much. I'd grown too necessary. That scared him. I stood up, willing my legs not to shake. I'll clear out my office. There's no need to rush, Carl said, gesturing as if to soften the blow. Take the day. Security will assist you. Security. Of course. Like I was going to steal something. Like I hadn't given this company everything. Nights, weekends, cancel vacations, holidays spent on Zoom, troubleshooting an outage in the middle of nowhere. I skipped my sister's wedding to finalize a partnership with a medical distributor in Houston. I'd even missed saying goodbye to my dog of 10 years because of a last-minute crisis meeting. All of it. For Redwood. And now I was being escorted out. I walked back to my office for just a little while longer, passing through a sea of familiar faces that suddenly felt foreign. Some looked away. Others stared, eyes wide with disbelief, or worse, relief. They knew. In corporate America, bad news moves fast. Faster than memos. Faster than Slack threads. By now, everyone had heard. I stepped into the office I had called home more than my actual apartment. The sunlight streamed in through the large windows, overlooking Puget Sound. It was a view I'd earned, but rarely had time to enjoy. The wall of plaques and awards, framed photos from industry conferences, a signed basketball from a charity tournament I organized. It all looked like someone else's life. A life that was being erased. I went to the supply closet down the hall and grabbed a cardboard box. There's something especially humiliating about putting your life into a single box. I dropped in my nameplate first, Daniel Caldwell, COO, as if it were a tombstone. Then the pen I'd used to sign our first multi-million-dollar hospital system deal. The stress ball shaped like a brain that a client had sent me as a joke, but that had somehow followed me through 3 office moves. A photo of my niece and nephew at the company picnic. No kids of my own. Never had the time. Always figured I'd get to it after the next quarter. Then I reached for the small bonsai tree on my windowsill. A gift from my dad when I made partner. Tough roots, he'd said. Slow growing but strong. Just like you. The little tree had survived fluorescent lights, dry air, and months of neglect. Still alive. Still growing. Unlike my career, there was a soft knock at the door. Renee, my executive assistant of 6 years, stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, eyes red and swollen. They've already asked me to move to Logan's team, she said quietly. I told them I needed time to think. You should take it, I said, keeping my voice calm. Your son's applying for college soon. I know tuition doesn't wait. Her chin trembled. It's not right. No, I said, but it's reality. She stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. They're blaming you for the Summit Health integration delays, she whispered. Said the budget overruns came from poor operational oversight. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's rich. Summit's our most successful rollout in 3 years. I know that. Everyone does. Not everyone. Not anymore. She hesitated, biting her lip. They want your contacts. Your transition notes. They're asking for everything. Of course they were. Logan couldn't manage a lunch order without help, much less a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Tell him to put it in writing, I said coldly. Company policy requires a formal request through legal. Until then, nothing leaves my hard drive. Renee nodded, a flash of defiance crossing her face. She'd always been loyal, even when it wasn't easy. As she turned to leave, my phone rang. Unknown number. I stared at the screen, ready to let it go to voicemail, assuming it was some HR rep with a fake apology. But something made me answer. Daniel Caldwell, I said, the words automatic, muscle memory. The voice on the other end was smooth, confident, unmistakable. Daniel, it's Olivia Hart, CEO of Sable Cross Health Tech. My heart skipped. Sable Cross, our fiercest rival. The one Carl had called that vulture in a blazer in more than one closed-door meeting. The company we'd fought tooth and nail for market share. Olivia Hart, the woman Carl resented with every fiber of his good OL boy network. Olivia, I said cautiously, this is unexpected. I heard what happened, she said. News travels fast, apparently faster than integrity. She laughed, not cruelly, almost sympathetically. Let me be blunt. Redwood just made the dumbest move in its history, and I'd like to discuss how I can benefit from that mistake. Can you meet today? My mind raced. Taking a meeting with our biggest competitor on the day I was terminated would raise legal red flags. But I wasn't employed anymore. My contract was void, and frankly, my patience was too. Why me? I asked. There was a pause then, because they just threw away the engine under their hood, and I'd rather build something with that engine than watch it go to waste. She gave me a time and a place. 4 p.m., the Edgewater Hotel. The lounge. Come alone, she said. Let's talk about turning their betrayal into your beginning. The line went dead. I looked at the box of my belongings. At the bonsai tree. At the plaque that said Innovation Leader of the Year, 2021. The phone buzzed again. Text from security. Escort scheduled in 20 minutes. They weren't just letting me go. They were locking me out. But inside me, something stirred. Not just anger. Something colder. Sharper. They thought I was done. I wasn't. Not by a long shot. I drove in silence. Seattle traffic crawled like it always did, but I barely noticed the blur of brake lights or the drizzle tapping against my windshield. The box of my former life sat in the back seat, but it felt more like a passenger than a burden now. With every mile, the sting of betrayal dulled slightly, replaced by something else, curiosity and maybe hope. The Edgewater Hotel sat perched on Elliott Bay like a relic of old Seattle. Elegant, weathered but dignified. It was the kind of place Redwood execs use for showy investor dinners and champagne PR launches. I'd never stepped foot in it for personal business. Until today. The concierge gave me a knowing nod as I entered. Olivia Hart was already there. She sat alone at a corner table in the lounge, dressed in a charcoal blazer over a deep green blouse that made her steel gray eyes stand out even more. Her posture was effortless, but her presence carried weight. She was the kind of leader who didn't demand respect. She just got it. As I approached, she stood and offered her hand. Daniel, thank you for coming. Let's say curiosity won out, I replied, shaking her hand. Firm, measured, the kind of grip that didn't need to prove anything. We sat. A server appeared, and without missing a beat, Olivia ordered an Earl Grey. I asked for black coffee, needing something bitter to match the taste in my mouth. I followed your career for a long time, she said once we were alone again. 15 years building Redwood from a logistics shell into a national player. The Summit rollout, the Westbridge pivot, the optimization framework you designed last year. That was you. I nodded slowly. Apparently, none of that mattered. It mattered to people paying attention, she said. Which, to be clear, Carl Whitaker is not. Her words cut through the haze I'd been stuck in all day. You're not here to flatter me, I said. No, she smiled. I'm here to offer you something Carl never would. Real power. Real freedom. A partnership. That word hit harder than I expected. A partnership? She nodded. Board seat. Equity. Strategic autonomy. I wanted to come to Sable Cross. Not just as another exec. We have plenty of those. I want you to help lead it. I stared at her. I just got fired this morning. And by this afternoon, she said smoothly, you're the most valuable free agent in this entire industry. You have something most people never do. Insider knowledge, client trust, operational vision, and a reputation for delivery. You don't just know how Redwood works. You made it work. I let that sit for a moment, the weight of her words pushing against the disbelief I still carried. She leaned in slightly. Let's talk specifics. The Bayview Alliance contract. Redwood has held it for 5 years. It's up for renewal in 90 days. Worth north of $40 million annually now. I want it. I blinked. I led the last 3 renewals personally. Exactly. You know every pain point, every name on their procurement committee, every system hiccup we could solve better. We don't need Redwood's files. We have something better. We have you. I exhaled slowly, caught between the ethics I'd lived by and the fire burning inside me now. My non-compete restricts you from working directly for Redwood's competitors for 12 months, she said, already a step ahead. But it doesn't block independent consulting. It doesn't bar you from helping clients evaluate new options. Legal already checked. Of course they had. I sipped my coffee. You're offering me a weapon. No, she said. I'm offering you a platform. I paused, letting her words settle. Why now? I asked. Why take a risk on someone who just got canned? She didn't flinch. Because I've been that person. Underestimated. Undercredited. Overqualified. I built Sable Cross to be a haven for the people the old guard cast aside. And because I want Carl to finally understand what it means to lose someone irreplaceable. I couldn't help the small laugh that escaped me. So, this is about revenge? Her smile faded into something more calculated. No, it's about recognition. But if it stings for them along the way, well, call it a side effect. A silence passed between us, charged and weighty. I need to think, I said. Take 48 hours, Olivia said. But just know, your market value is highest while the pain is fresh. Before they replace you in the minds of your clients. Before your legacy gets rewritten by people like Logan. She slid a black business card across the table. Clean white lettering. Just her name and a direct number. I took it almost reverently. As I stood to leave, Olivia said one last thing. Daniel, you weren't fired for failure. You were fired for being the only one who couldn't be manipulated. I didn't respond. Didn't have to. Because I already knew she was right. I drove aimlessly for a while after the meeting. Past the ferry docks, down along Alki Beach, where the water stretched into grayness under a quilt of overcast sky. I wasn't heading anywhere in particular. Just needed space, mental, physical, to process the seismic shift that had started this morning and hadn't stopped rolling since. 15 years of my life had collapsed in a boardroom. And now, here I was, with the blueprint of a possible resurrection tucked into my coat pocket in the form of a single business card. I ended up at a spot I used to go when the pressure at work boiled over. A small overlook by the water near Gasworks Park. No tourists, just silence, gulls, and the steady hum of the city behind me. I parked, stepped out of the car, and leaned against the railing. From here, I could see the gleaming windows of Redwood's headquarters on the far side of Lake Union. Still lit, still pulsing with the same energy that I once fed into it day after day, year after year. Somewhere in there, Logan was probably pacing around my old office, fumbling through files he didn't understand, asking questions he didn't even know were questions. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a name I hadn't seen in a while. Dr. Ellen Monroe, Chief Medical Officer of Bayview Alliance. A client I'd worked with for nearly a decade. More than a client, honestly, a friend. We'd shared strategies over red-eye flights and war stories over airport breakfasts. "Daniel," she said, her voice warm but sharp at the edges. "I just heard. Are you all right?" Still raw, I gave her the best answer I could manage. "Getting there. I got a call from Carl this afternoon," she said. He assured me that nothing would change in our relationship, that his son-in-law would be handling everything going forward. I let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "Let me guess, Logan." He introduced himself as if I didn't already know him from that disastrous site visit last quarter, she said, her tone edged with restrained fury. I said nothing, letting her speak. I told him we'd be reevaluating our vendor options, starting immediately. That made me pause. "Ellen, I'm not with Redwood anymore. I can't speak on their behalf." "I don't want you to," she replied. "I want your expertise, off the record, unofficially, until things formalize. You know our systems better than anyone. You know what we care about. If I'm going to reevaluate, I want to do it right." There it was. The door cracked open. I didn't need to force it. I just needed to walk through. "I may be consulting soon," I said carefully. "I'll keep you informed when that's official." "I hope so," she said, "because if this is the beginning of something new for you, I want it on the ground floor." We hung up, and I stood there a little longer, looking out over the water, feeling the tension begin to shift into something I hadn't felt in months. Control. I drove home, showered off the residue of the day, and poured myself a bourbon, neat, no ice. Then I sat at my kitchen counter, opened my laptop, and pulled up the files I'd stored away under a folder I'd labeled just in case. Notes, diagrams, relationship maps, system audits. Nothing confidential, nothing proprietary, but everything valuable. I wasn't breaking any rules. I was just preparing. The next morning, I signed Olivia's partnership agreement. By 2 p.m., I had keys to a temporary office space in Fremont, deliberately chosen for its view, directly across the water from Redwood's tower. Petty? Maybe, but satisfying. I called Ellen Monroe and scheduled a formal consulting session. The next 48 hours were a blur of setups and strategy. I didn't call anyone at Redwood. I didn't have to. The unraveling had already begun. 3 days later, a text from Renee arrived. "Logan can't find a summit onboarding documentation. Major panic before this morning's presentation. Carl is fuming." I didn't reply, but I smiled, because the documentation wasn't missing. It was right where I always kept it, neatly filed in the shared drive under Project Archives. But without the mental roadmap I'd built over 15 years, navigating that system was like trying to land a plane in the dark with no instruments. I hadn't sabotaged a thing. I just stopped saving them. By the end of the week, my calendar was full. Calls with hospital executives, meetings with compliance officers, exploratory sessions with board members from organizations that once wouldn't return Sable Cross's calls. Now, they were all eager to hear what I had to say, not because of where I was, but because of who I'd always been. That Friday, I met with Olivia again, this time in the new office. She walked in, glanced at the windows, and smirked. "You picked this spot on purpose." "Just a happy accident," I said, sipping my coffee. "You can see his corner office from here." I smiled. "I know." She dropped a thick folder on my desk. "Initial market response to your consulting practice. 3 hospital systems want full evaluations. All Redwood clients. None of this required a single cold call. You've built more than a resume, Daniel. You've built gravity." I flipped through the folder. Harborview Medical, Crestline Regional, even Rosewood, a client Redwood nearly lost last year, if not for a late-night deal I brokered personally. And then came the moment I hadn't expected. Another buzz. Another message from Renee. "They lost Harborview today. CFO meltdown. Carl called an emergency meeting. Ethan's under pressure. Ethan, Logan. It didn't matter. The legacy Carl had tried to hand off like a family heirloom was crumbling in his hands. And the more they tried to imitate leadership, the more obvious the void became. But here's what they still didn't understand. I wasn't taking anything from Redwood. They were losing it, all on their own. Without me there to buffer their mistakes, to clean up their chaos, to rebuild what they broke, it was all slipping. Later that night, I walked into my office alone. I poured another bourbon, then stood by the window, looking across the water. Lights still on. Probably another late-night strategy session, trying to explain why clients were vanishing, why revenue projections were dipping, why the man they thought was expendable had somehow become the gravitational pull they couldn't replicate. And then my phone rang. Blocked number. I already knew who it was. Daniel Caldwell. I answered. Daniel, it's Carl. I didn't say anything at first. Just let the silence settle like ash. I think we got off on the wrong foot during your transition, he said. That fake warmth again. The tone he used when trying to act like everything was fine. Like this was just a polite negotiation. The board's been reassessing. We may have been hasty. There it was. The scramble. The fear. I'd like to discuss the possibility of bringing you back, he continued. Not in the same role, of course, but as a senior advisor. Flexible terms. Whatever works for you. I looked out the window, sipping slowly. No thank you. Daniel, he pressed. We can be competitive. Compensation. Bonuses. Title. Just say the word. It was never about the money, Carl. Then what do you want? I thought about that for a moment. What did I want? Revenge? Vindication? Power? Maybe all of it. But most of all, I wanted him to understand what he threw away. Not just a COO, not just a systems guy, but the very soul of his company. The one person who never wanted his seat, just wanted the company to work. You replaced me with a puppet, I said. You stripped 15 years of experience out of the engine room and handed the keys to someone who doesn't even know how to steer. And now you're wondering why the ship's taking on water. A beat passed. He tried to recover. Look, Daniel, this is just business. These things happen. No, Carl. Nepotism happens. Arrogance happens. And consequences follow. Is this about the Bayview account? He asked, voice growing tight. This is about 15 years of sacrifice. Missed birthdays. Burned out relationships. Holidays I spent in airports chasing contracts for you. And how you thanked me by blindsiding me in a boardroom like I was just another line item. He went quiet, and I didn't need to hear more. This isn't a grudge, Carl. This is a correction. One that started the moment I walked out your front door. Then I hung up. No threats. No shouting. Just truth. The next morning, Olivia forwarded me a news alert. Redwood stock had dropped 18% after analysts downgraded their outlook, citing executive instability and client migration. Then came another message from Renee. Bayview going public with vendor switch next week. Carl's panicking. Board furious. Ethan frozen on call with compliance team this morning. They were blindsided by the HIPAA violations you warned about in Q2. And another message, this time from Steven, the CFO who couldn't meet my eyes the day I was fired. Subject line, you were right. Inside, a PDF of the board meeting minutes. The ones where they'd planned my removal 3 weeks ahead of time. The emergency vote had been staged. Everything Carl said was a lie. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. They weren't just facing loss. They were watching collapse. Not because I sabotaged them, but because I stopped saving them. The following week came like a thunderstorm. Sudden, loud, and impossible to ignore. It started with Bayview. They went public with the news. Redwood's contract was terminated. A full-page press release in Modern Healthcare outlined their transition to Sable Cross, citing responsiveness, innovation, and leadership continuity as key reasons. It didn't mention my name, but they didn't have to. Everyone in the industry knew who had held that relationship together. And everyone in Carl's office knew who had just cost them their golden goose. By midweek, 2 more hospital networks had reached out. Former Redwood clients. Both were reevaluating their partnerships. Both requested to consult with me personally. Meanwhile, Olivia's team moved fast. Sable Cross hosted a private summit for potential clients, and I was the keynote speaker. It felt surreal, standing on a stage, not as a stand-in or a background architect, but as the face of something bigger, something I was finally helping shape, not just execute. After the speech, I stepped off stage to a round of applause that didn't feel hollow or rehearsed. It felt earned. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Renee again. Lindale deal collapsed. Full audit revealed HIPAA violations. Board in full meltdown. Carl under formal review. Ethan gone. Just one word. Gone. I stared at the screen, letting it sink in. Lindale had been Carl's crown jewel. A $2.7 billion acquisition that was supposed to redefine Redwood's future. I'd warned him months ago about their flimsy compliance, about the security holes in their prescription management system, about the potential lawsuits waiting to happen. But Carl didn't want friction. He wanted fanfare. And now the entire deal had turned radioactive. Then came the text that hit hardest. This time from Steven, the CFO. Board is meeting tonight. Crisis response mode. Carl's resignation expected by morning. I sat back in my chair and looked out the tall glass windows of the event center. Across the water, in the distance, I could still see Redwood's building, but looked smaller now, dimmer. It wasn't just a company falling apart. It was a delusion unraveling. Carl had always believed he was the architect, that the tower he built would stand because of his name, his contacts, his vision. But now, the truth was obvious. He had never built it alone. He'd built it on the backs of people like me, quiet operators, system fixers, trust builders. And when he discarded us, the whole damn thing shook loose. That night, I got the call. Not from Carl. He wouldn't have the dignity. It was Thomas, a former board member who once championed my promotion to COO. We made a mistake, he said, skipping past pleasantries. I know. We'd like to open a conversation. Something senior. Substantial. Autonomy guaranteed. I paused. I'm flattered, Thomas. But I already have that. Silence on the other end. Understand, he finally said. Just for the record, I fought to keep you. Carl bulldozed us. Said you were too rigid, too slow to pivot. I wasn't slow, I replied. I was cautious. And I was right. He didn't argue. Good luck, Daniel. You deserve it. As we ended the call, another email popped up, this time from the CEO of an East Coast medical network I'd never worked with before. Subject line, we'd like to build with you. I stared at it for a moment before opening it. They weren't looking for a vendor. They were looking for a partner. And that was the difference. Redwood had always wanted to own the spotlight. Sable Cross wanted to share it. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was no longer just surviving the corporate game. I was rewriting the rules. The call came at 8:12 on a Monday morning. I was in the middle of prepping for a joint meeting with the Sable Cross Innovation Team, an executive from Summit Care, another major hospital group ready to jump ship from Redwood. The office was calm, the sun coming in strong through the east-facing glass, and Olivia was already 2 espressos deep into her strategic planning notes. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't need to guess. I answered without emotion. Daniel Caldwell. Silence at first. Then, the voice that had once commanded rooms, charmed investors, and buried dissidents under layers of corporate civility. Daniel, Carl Whitaker, said slowly. Good morning. I didn't respond. He cleared his throat. I understand you're busy, but I'd appreciate a few minutes of your time. His voice had changed. The edge was gone. What remained was a hollow version of the man who once looked down at me across a boardroom table and slid me an envelope like it was charity. I'll be brief, he continued. The board has asked me to step down. Officially, Ethan's gone. Lindale fell apart exactly the way you warned. And Bayview's press release. He trailed off. That one hurt, he admitted. Good, I thought. But I didn't say it. He kept going. The board is discussing next steps. Rebuilding trust. Leadership transition. And, well, your name came up. Did it? I said, my voice flat. Yes. They're open to bringing you back. Not just as an advisor this time, Daniel. As president. Full operational control. You be free to rebuild the way you see fit. It was everything I'd once wanted. But he was too late. I stood by the window and looked across Lake Union again. From here, Redwood's building looked like a dying monument, still standing but flickering. Fragile. I didn't rush my reply. Carl, let me tell you something I've learned these past few weeks. He waited. I never needed Redwood to succeed. I thought I did. For a long time, I believed my value came from that company's logo next to my title. But it didn't. I turned and walked back to my desk where the Sable Cross agenda waited. My value was never in the building. It was in the blueprint. It was in me. Carl tried again, voice desperate now. Daniel, I made mistakes. But this is your moment to return and define the next era. No, I said, calm and final. I already am. Just not with you. But think about what you're giving up. Legacy, resources, reputation. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. What you're offering isn't legacy. It's cleanup duty. It's a second-hand throne in a crumbling kingdom. And I'm not here to fix what you broke. He tried one last card. The flattery. You were always the soul of the company, Daniel. The heart. I let that hang in the air, then said quietly, that's why it died the moment you cut me out. Click. I ended the call. No dramatics. No speeches. Just closure. I turned back to the desk. Olivia looked up at me from across the room. That the king of the ashes? Something like that, I said. We got back to work. That afternoon, Sable Cross finalized a new agreement with Summit Care, worth nearly $60 million annually. I signed the deal from a position Carl could never offer: freedom, authority, and partnership. Later, I received a final message from Renee. Official, Carl out. Thomas interim CEO. Entire leadership slate being reviewed. Redwood stock down 31%. The empire had cracked. Not because I burned it down, but because I walked away with a match still in my pocket. I stood at the window one more time. Same view. Same river. But I wasn't the man on the other side anymore. I was on a rise. And Redwood was just a name on a building. No longer mine to carry. No longer worthy of it. It's funny how a title can feel like an identity until someone strips it away. For 15 years, I walked into Redwood's glass tower, thinking that my worth lived somewhere inside those walls. In the revenue graphs, in the client decks, in the hallway nods from executives who saw me as the guy who'd never dropped the ball. But when the door shut behind me for the last time, when I stood there with nothing but a box in my arms and a storm in my chest, I realized something powerful. My value never lived in that building. It was never up for debate. They just forgot. And for a while, so did I. But not anymore. You see, when they erased my name from the executive roster, they thought I'd disappear. When they replaced me with someone who couldn't spell HIPAA, they thought the system would keep working. When they handed me a severance check and a security escort, they thought that would be the end. They didn't count on one thing. I wasn't done yet. I took my experience, my scars, my quiet knowledge, and I built something better. Not just a company, but a place where people like me could lead without politics, without family ties, without performance masked by power games. I didn't get revenge. I got clarity, and with it came momentum. Today, I walk into rooms where I don't have to prove myself. I sit at tables I helped design. I build systems that honor people, not just bottom lines. I partner with clients who value my insight, not my proximity to a CEO's inner circle. So if you're reading this, if you've ever been sidelined, stepped on, silenced, or underestimated, I want you to remember one thing. You're not the title on your door. You are the foundation beneath it. And when they forget your value, let them. Because sometimes the best way to teach them is to leave quietly, build loudly, and become something so powerful. They have no choice but to watch. Has someone ever tried to erase your story? Replaced you with someone who didn't earn it? I'd love to hear your journey. Share your story in the comments. And if this one hit home, if it reminded you of your own worth, subscribe to the channel. Because I'll be here telling stories that don't just expose betrayal, but celebrate what rises after it.